next speaker is River Gates. She's representing Audubon Alaska, and she is the Pacific Shorebird Conservation Initiative Coordinator. River?
Does somebody get to do my presentation for me? Will you put it up? Oh, it's not up, though. Oh, just click. Oh, it is. Thank you. Well, I want to say thanks to Matt for the introduction, and then also the Mendenhall Wetlands Study Group for having me here today. I'm going to be talking about the Mendenhall Wetlands Important Bird Area. And again, I'll just introduce myself again. My name is River Gates. Sorry, I work for the National Audubon Society, and in my job as a shorebird coordinator, I work in the international scale, and so I hope to bring some of my knowledge of working with shorebird conservation across the entire Pacific Flyway to bear to this evening's discussion. So as you've already heard, Important Bird Areas is a program that is managed by BirdLife International. That's a non-profit global organization, and they manage these sites I'll just go back. So the Important Bird Areas is managed by BirdLife International, and they have 19 international partners. Those are locally based partners. In the United States, the Important Bird Areas are managed by Audubon, my organization, and the American Bird Conservancy. So what is an important bird area? Well, an important bird area, functionally speaking, is an area that is identified to protect, manage a network of sites that are important for long-term viability of bird populations across their geographic ranges. So what that means is that a lot of birds, especially water birds, use a series of different sites throughout their annual cycle to complete their annual cycle. So they have wintering locations that they have site fidelity to, and they also have breeding site fidelity and fidelity to different migration points across their flyways. So the idea of the important bird areas is not necessarily to preserve one place, it's preserving a network of sites that are key for the annual life cycle of migratory birds. The sites themselves provide essential habitats both for breeding, wintering, and migration for the bird's annual life cycles. But what the important bird areas do is they create partnerships with conservation planners, private landowners, and the public to create site conservation through science-based conservation actions. And the Mendenhall Wetlands is a perfect example of that, the study group that proposed the IBA. BirdLife continues to manage the Important Birds Area program, but it's turned into something a little bit different. So now they have evolved into the key biodiversity areas. And so what that means is they've started to take into consideration other taxonomic groups of animals that need biodiversity protection. And so one way of thinking about it is all IBAs are key biodiversity areas, but not all key biodiversity areas are important bird areas. So in terms of how many IBAs there are in the Americas, it's in the thousands. And you can see here in the dark dots, those are the ones in the United States, and then the international IBAs. And so there's thousands of IBAs that have been designated by local organizations, and they really act to stitch together the different life cycles of a variety of different bird taxa. So not just shorebirds, not just land birds. There's sites that are specific for shorebirds, land birds, seabirds, raptors, and waterfowl. So it really is an all bird protection network. So the word global is coming up a lot because not only is the Mendenhall Wetlands an important bird area, it's a globally important bird area. And so within the important bird program, there's 3 different tiers of important bird areas. And so if you go at the bottom, there's regional ones. And if you go up one level, it's the continental level, and then the next level up is the global level. It's synonymous with an international level. And so those criteria focus on species of conservation concern. That just makes practical sense. If we're trying to recover bird populations, we want to protect the sites for populations that are already depressed. Species that are range restricted, they don't have broad distribution. Those sites that they need are limited just in their geographic range. Species that like unique habitat types. Surf birds would be an example of that around here. And then also species that occur in large congregations. So we're really investing in the sites and the areas that birds use, the most number of birds use those sites. So in Alaska, this is not a news briefing to anybody, but Alaska as a state is one of the most valuable states for birds. It's the breeding grounds for millions of birds. Somewhere between 10 million shorebirds come to Alaska every year and nest here. So you can see here on this figure, these are all of the IBAs in the state of Alaska, with the red being the global IBAs, blue being continental, that's that national level. And then the state is the green IBAs, and then yellow is potential ones that they were looking at doing. And you can see here, we've got our own Mendenhall wetlands right there. It's one of 2 global IBAs in this area. So beyond just the global IBA program, as I was saying earlier, I work in international shorebird conservation. And so one of the exercises that we did a few years ago is we wanted to see how many sites were important for shorebirds across the entire Pacific Flyway. Our study area is more or less northwestern Alaska all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. And we came up with a list of 170 different sites. And this is just one section of our map. So I left out the northern part, and I left out Central America, South America, in the lower 48. And so what you can see in this map, I want to illustrate to you, is that you've got a lot of big sites here. So if we go down to Mexico down here, this is Guerrero Negro, San Francisco, this is the Fraser River going north, Great Salt Lake, and the Lahontan wetlands. Those are all hemispheric or global shorebird sites in this area. And then as you go up, there's 4 or 5 sites right here, but nothing on the scale of a hemispheric site or a large site. And so until you get back up to the Copper River Delta here, which is where you have an abundance of these hemispheric or larger sites. And so when Matt was talking about how important the Mendenhall wetlands is, you have to take into consideration that birds travel a long ways to get here. And they have one opportunity at the Fraser River Delta. Fraser River Delta is like huge, super productive. They get there, they stay there a long time. They fuel up and they're like, okay, let's see if I can hit the Copper River Delta. That's the next big one. Sometimes they don't make it up there, maybe it's not in their life history. So these areas of these wetlands, these are smaller wetlands, give them opportunities to fall out if the weather sucks, or they just don't have the capacity to fly that far to the next site. So these smaller wetlands are super important. There's so much emphasis on big places that are really important, but what we're finding as shorebird scientists is that the smaller sites have equal value, and that it gives the birds the ability to move around, and it also increases their capacity to be in places for longer periods of time. So going back to the IBAs. So here is a map of the different IBAs that are here in this area. And again, this is to further this point that I was talking about in terms of the farthest south, so we're just in southeast Alaska, and once you've left the Fraser River Delta, you hit a lot of rocky shores for a really long time. And then you can hit the Stickeen, which is right here, and we've got the Mendenhall wetlands here. Berners Bay is up here. And then the Yakutat Forelands is right here. That's another area that's got a lot of great mudflats on it. And then Icy Bay is there, and then you have the Copper River Delta all the way up here. So if you're looking just at coastal, global scale wetlands, these are the ones that have been identified during the IBA process. And so the Mendenhall Wetlands State Game Refuge, the numbers that I have here are looking at just the designation of the IBA site. It's a larger site. The polygon is larger than the state game refuge. But you can see that it's a large wetlands complex with a diversity of terrestrial, estuarine, and marine habitats. And it's that diversity of habitats that really makes Mendenhall wetlands very attractive to a lot of different species and creates a great place for them to hang out. And I also wanted to point out, because I was curious, how many state game refuges there are. There's 12, so there's one of 12 game refuges in this town. In terms of the designation for the site, there's been about 230 species observed in the area. That represents roughly 70% of the avian taxa in the area can be seen just on the Mendenhall wetlands. And it's a super important area for providing habitat for migratory birds as well as residents. So when I look at the Mendenhall Wetlands Refuge, I kind of came to a lot of the same conclusions that Matt has already come to in terms of what is the value of this spot. It's more than just a valuable place for birds. Obviously, there's a lot of information. We haven't even gotten into the weeds of like how many species, what time of year, but we have all that information because of the Mendenhall Wetlands Study Group. They've been voracious in documenting these wetlands in the last couple of decades. And because of that, we know so much about why these wetlands are important. So the designation of the state game refuge in 1976 was recognizing that it was an important migratory bird habitat. The IBA designation followed up in 2007, designated it because of large populations being here. And this is slightly incorrect. So the designation for this IBA the global designation hinges on two species, Thayer's gull and surfbirds. So you guys have more surfbirds here than lots of people do, but yeah, there's been observations of surfbirds at a level that designates this as a globally important wetland. In terms of other things about just not necessarily just about the values to birds, it occurs to me that this is an amazing place for nearby recreation, for fishing and hunting, and subsistence living here in Juneau. It's at your back door. You don't have to get in a plane. You don't probably even have to get in a car sometimes. So that is amazing that you have such a rich resource so locally available to you, coming from Anchorage. I mean, I live next to a refuge as well, but in any case, it's also very valuable for nursery habitats for fish. So if we want to keep fishing, we need to keep these wetlands intact so that we can continue to fish. An amazing outdoor classroom. The kids can get in a school bus. They can be on the wetlands in 10 minutes and tromps around and kind of get to know their environment. It also supports local tourism. And it provides a diversity of benefits for a diversity of stakeholders, including ecosystem services and flood protection. So, and with that, I'll say thank you very much. And I will be on the panel and can answer questions later. Thank you.